Hey, y'all. This is Reverence for Impulse, and I'm Weena Pauly-Tarr. This podcast is my attempt to more deeply understand and explore impulse through conversations with people that inspire me. We step into connection without any planning or agenda, but with respect for the impulses that brought us here and shape how we are when we're together. I'm so glad you followed your impulse to listen in. Before I introduce Laura Khoudari, I wanted to let you all know that on April 10th, Mariana Boccuzzi and I are offering a free webinar about our upcoming course for therapists, SEPs, somatic coaches, practitioners, called From Patterns to Presence. In the webinar, you'll get to hear more about the course and what we're covering and learn a little bit more about why we think this work is so important. It's free, it's on April 10th, and it will be recorded if you can't be there live. You can sign up on my site, weenapauly.com. Do you ever have those moments when you reflect back on the people that you were around in school or at a job or some training, and there's that one person that from a distance you feel a kind of soulful chemistry, but for whatever reason, time and space or group dynamics, you just don't get to drop into connecting in a way that you know is possible? Well, this was my sense of Laura. Laura Khoudari is a trauma-informed wellness writer, coach, and storyteller, and I met her in SE school. I knew she was a trainer, and I was intrigued because I thought, wait, trainers can use SE? That's actually why I left training. I couldn't deal with folks wanting to sculpt, maximize, minimize parts of their bodies without dealing with what was really going on beneath that desire. And here was Laura doing that very thing. And even after SE school, she went out and wrote a book about it called Lifting Heavy Things, Healing Trauma One Rep at a Time. Since this incredible book launched, Laura has continued to evolve and is so open and honest about her own process. It's hard to not feel close to what she shares. In this podcast, we discuss writing, disordered eating, active edges and effort, injury, how to manage the expectations of betterment culture, and what it really takes to change. Laura was so present with me, and I enjoyed connecting with her finally so much. It was affirming to know that my initial hunch about our connection was right on target. We started with an AM practice and pushed record from there. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Yeah, it feels different than even just like a Zoom too. Like when I witnessed you just now, like all of a sudden, much more of me was here, and like I got to really take you in a way that's not verbal and sort of intellectually exciting, even though that's fun too.
Yeah.
It was sort of like, here's Laura, like, right, Laura, this is Laura.
Yeah.
And it feels like tender to take that moment, the pause to just be like, before we launch in, it's like, who am I with here today? Who is this? Who am I too? I feel very fragile emotionally today. So like it doesn't take much to feel the waves of feelings. And it's nice to remember that I can like also be that way here and not have to like perform. So
Yeah. Good. It was interesting for me, I think. That's interesting. Earlier today, I have a planner that's also like astrological.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing some prompts because it's the first of the month. And but I think this was actually maybe even just like a very quick daily prompt was like, well, I have it right here. I'll tell you what the prompt was. I think I did yesterday's prompt, and I realizing it. But it was about, my answer was listen. And by listen, yeah, what's one way I can be generous with myself or others today? it's a prompt that
Mm,
regularly repeats itself. And
mm-hmm.
today's answer for me that came to me right away was listen. But when I say listen, I mean more of the witnessing role, more like witness, I guess. Um, I can get very quiet. I am actually in a long distance romantic relationship right now. And there's a lot of time on the phone. And this is a criticism I've heard from other people too, even in-person people. When I listen, I can often be very quiet because I'm not just listening. I'm like, I'm like listening with my whole body, my whole field. Um, and it's one thing to do that with somebody who you are in an intimate relationship with and you are far away from each other. So that is how you're finding intimacy. Or if you're in person with somebody, then they can really see you and they can see you're listening. This is like a funny in between because you can see me. Well, your eyes were closed, but now you can see me and I can see you. But I think you're right. I think when we jump on Zoom, unless we set the intention to do otherwise, we don't listen with our whole bodies. I always think of like max headroom.
Mm, yeah. Yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of people don't. I mean, and also, and granted, I know a lot of people who are too young to know Max Headroom, but yeah, that I was fascinated by that show as a kid, and like that, the Max and like just like a head in a box. And
Mm-hmm.
once we became so video call oriented, it has its place and it's great and it's wonderful. But I definitely had very like Max Headroom feelings about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's been a huge learning curve for sure. I think what I had never even had a desk prior to the pandemic. Like I just was not ever seated at a place doing a thing. That just wasn't how I moved around. So it was really hard. And it took a while for me to learn how to be okay sitting and being, you're quite held. If you want to stay in view of the camera, your movement is inhibited, unless you sort of say, I'm gonna go get some tea or whatever. Like you're gonna have to like state I'm leaving your view. Um, and that took a long time to figure out how to tolerate. It was like a C practice and like building capacity to tolerate what showed up when I was still.
Mm.
So, and then learning how to find connection through the screen too, which I think we've all practiced really well. And I'm so shocked at how much we can connect deeply,
Yes. I
somatically. Yeah.
I think so too, but I think that I am thinking about all the times I don't feel disconnected. So I had some like interesting stuff when this all started. My book came out. I was and like
This book right here.
my lifting heavy things came out
Yes. Amazing.
in when we were all still very much at home. And when I had started writing a book and had my contract to publish a book, I had visions of my book tour and we were going to be in person in gyms and we were going to be moving and we were going to be eating and we were going to be hugging and we were going to be so happy together.
In 3 dimensions. Yeah.
And I did my book tour online
Mm.
and it I the screen would go off after like wonderful workshops where people were feeling really good. I think, I mean, that's what they said. But I would feel so alone.
Mm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so alone.
Yeah. I hear
And I
that.
think um, it's very easy when we're in our heads, which I certainly was. I mean, I was in my body because I was showing people how to be in their body. But as the practitioner, as a leader, as a teacher, it's wonderful if you can stay in your body while teaching embodiment. That is the goal.
Gee.
And it's like extra boss level hard because
Yeah.
you need to be thinking about how to help other people And then when you're on Zoom, it does seem to become more of an intellectual practice. It's also intellectual space is my comfort zone, right?
Mm.
I mean, I moved, we all move, and I, can look at it now, like, oh, wow, I really had all these signs of somebody who was not meant to spend their day at a desk. But growing up, I was picked on in gym class, bad at sports, and good at studies. So like intellectual is my safety comfort zone. So when you're under the stress and like, teaching and figuring out a new modality and intellectual is your comfort zone, it's very easy to go up into the head. But I think in doing that, I wasn't able to take all the positive stuff I was getting because I was being witnessed, but it didn't feel like it because I was so in my head, I wasn't feeling it. So I try not to do online events anymore unless they really have to be online
Yeah.
because I like the in-person.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much that's lost. And it's just like you said, when you leave a meeting, it's a button, and then you're instantly no longer with them. There's no transition apart, like even just proximity of bodies growing in distance. So that energetic connection can begin to wane as our bodies become
Right.
farther apart in space. That's gone in an instant. And so there's this weird like recalibration to, oh right, I'm here by myself, like you said. And it's funny the tenderness in hearing you say you're alone. And it's like I'm having that tenderness exactly the opposite because it's the first day I've been alone in almost 3 weeks. There's
Hmm.
been a lot of like family health, travel, tumult. And I realized today was the first day I was in my house alone. And it was like, oh, right. I fucking need this.
You
And
picked
it's
up
other
too.
people live here. I can't just tell them to not be here. Like
Yeah.
it's also their home. So I can go find aloneness for hours at a time, but there's something so um, necessary about that aloneness and also very easy for me in this Zoom work life,
Mhm.
which is the majority of my work is online. Some of it's in person, and then my dance making and practice is not, obviously, but um it's different to slide into that space of aloneness and then find that you're there actually a lot. And
Yeah.
that's sort of what what I haven't been experiencing, but what I know from being online is once the schedules are up and everybody's at work and school and I'm here, it is that it's the boom. Where's the water cooler? Like, oh my God, what'd you do this weekend? Like, where's the like talk shop about your clients or the thing that you love or the show you saw or that glue of relationship is so cut out. It makes me think of like old school anatomy labs where they would just like take away all the fascia, all the stuff. They're like, well, this is meaningless. We just want to show you the muscle. And
Right.
now everybody's like, wait, that's the stuff we need. It's the same in relationships. Like when we get so surgical in our interactions, like Zoom, and it becomes like off on in person, see your this, talk about these things, then we go. It's like all that connective tissue is gone. And it's really hard for me to feels like it's hard to move to if you're just muscles and bones.
Absolutely. They'll just fall off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how you felt in terms of the, you know, SE type work for me on Zoom. I know plenty of people can do it, and I'm not saying I can't do it, but I really struggled with the not having the in-person connection, and I had to put it down to some
Mm-hmm.
extent. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I know many people were able to really lean in and make it work, and that's wonderful. And I'm always clear when I say things like this. I'm not saying that I couldn't. I do believe that I could have. I didn't have the capacity or the drive to like
Mm-hmm.
figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
just I just went and wrote a book and said
I
went up
mean,
in my
Jesus,
head.
writing a book, I mean, I try not to like have questions in my head or be like, okay, I want to make sure we talk. Like, really, it's probably the hard part of this is like coming with no agenda. But even hearing you say that this more bookish academic zone is a safety for you, which is the opposite for me. Like, I'm happier to just start moving around. I love talking, but like I'm quite insecure about that part of my brain. Um, and so when I think about what would it take to write a book, I just marvel at that practice. Like, what was it like for you?
This is a wonderful exercise because I have to tell you, I am gearing up to write my next book. I can
Yay!
tell you exactly
What?
things that I
Yeah.
have gotten in touch with in the last week and a half that I, long forgot about, that are really important, which is like, well, there's a couple things. First of all, we have I think most people who eventually even decide to sit down and write a book have this vision that writing a book is like this very solitary practice. And yes, there is plenty of alone time when you're writing a book. There are so many people involved getting it from like, I have this book in me and I'm typing words on the page. And even with that, there can be people involved in terms of helping you get the words out, which I got a lot of support, and we can talk a bit about that too. But like, you need people because you don't know. And also, a lot goes into making a book. Um, and so there, if you flip to the acknowledgements page, I um I started reading the acknowledgement pages somewhere in my mid-30s when I finally started to admit out loud that all I really wanted to, I had always wanted to be a writer. And I admitted it out loud to like myself and this creative writing instructor who I had a Reiki practice and she was one of my clients and she taught creative writing. And I was like, what should I be reading? And that was it. I told no one else. A very deep secret. And I I just thought like you do this all by yourself, but you don't. And that's part of all the big scaries that kind of come up while you're writing a book and then you're getting ready to put a piece of you out there, because that's what it is. Even if it's a textbook, that's what it
Mhm.
is.
Mhm.
Um, there, it takes so long, and so many people have asked you questions and giving you things to think about that I think a lot of people have done a lot of work around like um, you're not alone in it, and also a lot of the things that one might feel vulnerable about, you really wind up getting the time and the space to, if you want to put in the work to make peace with it, which I
Mm.
think is really important for me. Um, I guess
Like a kind of integration of stuff, like through
100
writing. Yeah. Okay.
a lot of people ask because so I lifting heavy things has prescriptive, but it also has like a lot of personal stories.
Hmm.
And my next project is really much more like a memoir and, sharing parts of yourself, and also sharing, there's always like, how do you write about other people? Like
Hmm.
there is so much that goes into before you even get to the legal team.
Hmm.
There are people reminding you to maybe have them read it, or conversations, or like I'm really close with my parents, so they ask me about what I'm working on. It might come up naturally, like um I don't know. And then you have the time to sit there and you read the book after the manuscript it goes through several editing, and through each editing pass, you are reading it to see if you agree with the edits. And um, So you're reading your words over and over and over again. And yes, it makes ample space for integration.
Mm,
But there are other things, just like you have to admit you don't know how to do it. You have
mm,
to ask people. So for me, I was like, oh, I know I got this idea for the book, and I was like, I know I have it in me. I had enough confidence to know that I could write the words that needed to go on the page. I was like, I have no idea how to get that into like a book form that you buy. And
mm-hmm,
so I had my friend and colleague, Lisa Weiner, and we went to high school together. She runs an amazing program called Narrative Healing. At the time, I knew she was helping people. She was a literary coach, which she still does, but helping people make a book. And so
mm.
I reached out to her. I was like, how does one make a book? And she, and she brings a lot of embodiment into, she combines embodiment, movement practice with writing. And we talked about, she was always relating it to, well, how do you prepare for a workout? How do you prepare for that? And I was like,
Mm,
oh. And it was this idea of, she answered practical questions, but
mm-hmm,
also things like, what do I need in place to feel comfortable writing? How am I going
mm,
to take care of myself when I'm writing about hard things? Um,
mm,
and just, coaching you through that, a similar process that, any sort of therapeutic work of like, what's in, sort of what are the things we need to keep in mind and keep you feeling good and safe and like contained. Um, because at the end of the day, that makes better writing, and that makes a happier person, and gives you space to process. And so that's another part. It's like really thinking about like, so like Weena, for you, you said like you need you much rather move around. So like what do you put in if you were like decided you wanted to take on that kind of undertaking? Like what are the actual environmental considerations you would need to have in place to accommodate for the fact that you do have a lot of discomfort? You just started sitting at a desk in the last few years. Are you the kind of person who's going to do it all by talking into the phone while walking or dancing
mm,
around the room or cleaning your house? Or, are you the kind of, yeah, some people, need, some people, use medication for things like ADHD. Is it available right now? These are like
mm.
legitimate
Yeah.
questions. Um,
Was the experience that you had like a book, like you said, I felt I had like a book in me. Was the
yeah.
experience like you had, I have this thing, was it like a thing you wanted to say, a story? Was it about information? All of that? Like, what did it feel like?
It's so silly. The story, how it came to pass, is just feels so silly. But I think if I tell the story, it'll get me into that. I had my practice. I was working with somebody who like was gonna, a marketing, coaching, business Instagram person before what I thought I wanted to be on Instagram, which I really don't want to be. And she was like, you need a lead magnet. And I was like, what's a lead magnet? And a lead magnet is something that people wind up wanting. So they give you their email address. So you build out your list.
Okay.
My email list is still pathetic. I never did my lead magnet.
I feel like I've been asked that. Like, what did she call it? What is your opt in? Is what they were
Yes.
saying. And I was like, I don't know. And they're like, well, you need to. And I was like, I don't want that. I mean, maybe I should. I don't understand it quite right, or I don't understand
I
how
mean,
to
we
be
can talk about
authentic,
that too.
like
I
what?
have feelings.
Yeah, you're good.
We can circle back. So really quick, I was like, okay, well, I was like still in the place of like, well, this person is telling me that I need to do this, and I'm
Mhm.
paying her to tell me this, and she's very successful in what she's doing in a similar field. So I sat down to write a lead magnet. Like I was like, okay, what could I do? What could I, Laura, create
Mhm.
that I would be comfortable giving away? Um, and people would just sign up for my newsletter to get it, the opt-in. And, I am happy to do that sort of thing. And I was like, well, I'm a really strong writer. Um, I'll make a little ebook, like a small ebook about how to, about like trauma-informed weightlifting and how do you bring that into the practice. And then I was like, I wrote an outline and I had an 11 chapter book. I was like, it was
Wait
very
a second.
textbooky. It was different from what I wound up putting out there in the world. I was like, this is not a giveaway. This is a solid 2-year undertaking.
Yeah.
But I had it. It came out of
Yeah.
me. And
Okay.
it really shifted as I opened myself up to allow myself to really, and this I think starts to talk about like the should and the opt-in. I don't know that I want to. Should I do that? I don't know that I want to. As I was writing, I, with Lisa's encouragement, began to explore like what is it that I really want to be doing? And it was very quickly became clear I did not want to write a textbook.
Mm.
And I wanted people to know that there were options beyond trauma-informed or trauma-sensitive yoga for movement, and that actually, my belief is that you can really bring that lens to any movement practice. And here's how you can start to think about it for yourself, or how to consider asking for it from other movement teachers in your world. That was really important. I was like, this is a thing. This should be a thing. It can be a thing. It is a thing. And now it's much more of a thing. But at the time, it was very hard to find. And also, I wanted to write about my own healing story. I wanted to tell it because I was a closeted secret writer of memoir.
Mm.
And so I was allowing myself to not really listen to what I wanted to put out there. And all
And
along,
I noticed that you put yourself out there and you left like that the blank spaces, which I thought was so I, I mean, I appreciated that so much because there is such a I feel a very social ask to tell all and to expose all and to sort of like you're going to be more successful the more you share about yourself, and I find that not in alignment with how I want to live my life, and that I really do want privacy. And seeing you own that in your book, of course it elicits curiosity because then you're like, what? But I don't know the thing. And it's like, yeah, how about that? What's that like to not know the thing that she's referring to specifically, but to understand its weight and impact? And I think to me, that was like, it's not so different from authentic movement in that I'm observing you, but I don't know what's really going. I can see your body and I can make my own assumptions, but let's be honest, I don't know. I have no idea what's going on for you. And so where am I placing value? I'm placing value on what you allow me to witness and what you share. But I'm not entitled to know.
yeah, yes, I love that. This is the third time that has come up very directly this week, which is interesting because the book came out a while.
Because and because you're writing a memoir, and I wondered if that's different now.
I have so many things to say. This is about impulse. I'm going to go with the first
Yeah,
impulse, which
go.
was actually during the authentic movement. My experience at first was like, I found myself trying to make meaning of your movement. And then I was like, I don't, what you're saying. Like, I'm just seeing what I'm seeing. And so I stepped back and I feel like I kind of just widened my view in a way. And this is what I was saying about like listening. Like I was listening with my whole self, and plenty of times I couldn't even see you. Sometimes you were visible to me and sometimes you weren't. And all I could think was, this is motherhood.
Oh.
And it was
Oh.
because it was like, I cared, I was witnessing, I was able to know what you were sharing with me. And I was able to be here to be like, well, I'm here and I'm paying attention. Ooh, my phone, I thought I did turn it off. That's interesting. And but there's only because and when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about as a mother now, my daughter is almost 17. And so
Oh.
there's that
Mm.
you have done a lot of mothering. There's like a letting go while still being there, and not being intrusive, but also sometimes knowing when to ask. And making yourself available for whenever the person is, ready. Whether in mothering, we can expand that to like tending, or it doesn't have to necessarily be a child, right? We mother our friends and
Mm.
our mothers, and
Mm-hmm.
so I don't remember what you were talking about, but like I followed the impulse and then I lost the thread, which is
Yeah. No, I love it. We were the blank spaces.
of the blank spaces, and
Yeah.
yeah, within the memoir. And I think, and what goes into writing a book, and also the shoulds. A lot of people have a lot of shoulds about how we should market our practices, market our books, what we should put in a book, what we should tell. One of the reasons it came up was I was asked why I decided to, go with the publishing route I went, which is hybrid, which is um, a self-finance. It looks a lot like traditional publishing, but it's also self-publishing in the sense that it's self-financed. And at the time I wrote the book, I was also writing articles or like trying to promote my practice. And it was an era when it was the Me Too time. And I kept coming up against different like opportunities from different like well-read magazines where they'd want to like promote my work. But then I wouldn't give them a trauma story. And then they were like, well, what about your clients? So I was like, absolutely not. And in fact, I don't, wouldn't know my clients' stories a lot of the time,
Mm.
because that's not what I'm working with. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wouldn't get the coverage.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I'm not selling out. Like, it is more important to me. It started as self-protective, like I'm not ready to share.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized, I was like, wow, I am doing all this work without sharing. I can show other people that if they don't want to share, even though that's what our economy seem to really want,
Mm-hmm.
what people are asking of us, our talent, or what we're being told people want, that's okay. Like I don't need to do that. And I can make a space to show other people that they don't need to do that, because my whole take on all of the sharing I do, and actually like how I am, like even at a dinner party, like talking to other people, is like, I'm having an experience that feels maybe weird, but I bet you I'm not the only one. Like
Yeah.
we all want to think we are unique, and we are unique. But a lot of the time, if you don't want to share everything but are feeling pressured to do so, you're not the only one.
Yeah.
And so that was it became very much like a way to show people you can ask for help and be of service without sharing your trauma story. And the brackets, was such a funny thing. So just for like context for anyone who's listening, and if the context of the fact that I was dealing with a trauma was important in the story I was sharing, I would just put empty brackets to say like, the trauma. And a lot of people liked the space. They appreciated, and part of it was so many of the books that we might read when we're looking for help with things like trauma, when we're looking for help with healing, share all these upsetting, distressing, triggering, whatever the thing you're reading about that you're trying to have help healing from. They're telling you stories about so and so went through the same thing. And they're so busy trying to craft the experience of like, so you understand that they went through an experience that you wind up being triggered. So, and when you're triggered, you can't learn. So why would you do that in a book? And so if if I'm writing directly for people who are trying to do some healing work on their own and not practitioners, why am I going to want to trigger them?
Mm.
So we don't need to tell the story. And we can make space in the book for people to just have their own experience alone without feeling they have to compare or feeling, like, wow, that was just like, totally, they are now triggered and they're lost in their own trauma, or my trauma wasn't bad enough because it wasn't this trauma, or, well,
Mm.
that person doesn't understand because my trauma was so much worse, or all of those things. We can just say, something happened and it left me in this way. And the brackets, what some people were experiencing too, was they were able to literally just put their own thing in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it took away all the comparison and stuff, which is what I wanted. It made space to not be triggered, which is what I wanted. And then what I didn't see coming was people were like literally able to plonk their story in and
Mm-hmm.
make space for their own story. And I was like, wow, that's great.
I mean, that's amazing. And it speaks to sort of like a radical turn away from a kind of like activation addiction that is present in any story. And it's not that, listen, I love compelling stories and I love really specific, unique details about someone's life. Like that really matters to me, that kind of honesty. Um, the more specific you are, the more what is it? The more one can relate or something. I get all of that. And there's a little bit, you know, Resma Menakem has a name for it, dirty pain, which I don't love the name, but I like the way it describes the feeling of being attracted to and wanting to know, like, what is the thing? It doesn't feel like an impulse that I want to necessarily follow. It's a little bit of like slow down and ogle at the car wreck, right? It's like a little bit biology, what happened, orienting toward threat, trying to understand your relationship to it. It's a little bit of biology. It's also a lot of sort of social, cultural, like, they call it trauma porn, but like there is like that, like, I want to know that thing. And that feels icky to me. And you can kind of feel the difference when it's a compelling personal narrative and when it's like a drive to, eat away at
Yes.
what's been left at the carcass, and something like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really human impulse to want to know.
Sure.
And like, there are also other impulses when we honor them a lot. We don't feel so good.
Yeah. And when you pause that impulse, another one follows, which is like, maybe not.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like the first, like, in order to revere an impulse, it doesn't, for me, mean follow. It means relating to. So it could be, wow, I feel like I really want to know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I like that. That's true. Um, so the sharing, I think that was a big thing. So the publishing path I picked was because I was so tired of people telling me I needed to share my story or I wasn't going to get airtime.
It's the gatekeeping kind of a little bit. It makes me think of the last piece I did with Katie, our duet was totally self-produced DIY. Like we, put it all together and scrappy a version of, because we didn't want to adhere to those kinds of demands and requests. And we didn't want to have to feel the pressures of that.
Yeah, and that takes me to the like, when you're like, oh, should I have an opt-in? That kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My experience has been I've done some of the things you're supposed to do when some of them have felt uncomfortable because I do think I feel uncomfortable very easily. So I'm always like, okay, why are we uncomfortable?
I know.
Um, and like maybe this is a stretch yourself moment or
Yeah,
maybe this is a
exactly.
hell no moment. But
Right.
like take some time to consider. I did lots of stretching of myself. But there were a lot of hell no moments that were other people's absolutely, yes, you need to do this, you should do this. Look, I still don't have a very good mailing list. I don't, that hasn't done anything to me. I think
Mm,
I really, my, what I have done every step of the way in order to feel safe and good and like I'm doing right by me and therefore by others is honoring, like acting in alignment with my values. So privacy was one of them, and like, um, and then doing a good job, like writing a good book. I did not
mm,
have a lot to spend on publicity. I did a little bit of publicity, but it didn't get me a lot. Like it didn't get me any of the big hits I got, any of the fancy things I got, the accolades, um, came from me doing my work, writing a good book, talking to people and being nice, and just sort of showing up. And that was a lot of lesson for me because I have walked around most of my life thinking nobody likes me, everybody hates me, I should go kick rocks. What I have learned is, in fact, if I am just myself, people do seem to like me for the most part, and it all works out okay. Which is a big lesson to learn. But I think with all of that stuff, you know, I I agree. Like, yeah, consider all of those tools and all of those things. You know, I definitely have spent my money on some stuff that I was like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, but I was told I should, or spent energy. There hasn't been anything terrible that's happened, but I didn't see any. It was just a loss.
mm.
Um, but you know, and that's what I just keep telling myself now with the second book, where I, of course, there's part of me that's like, you can't write, you can't write a book. I'm like, I already wrote a book. And it was a good book. And that's the thing. Like it's been out a while and it's continued, it sells constant, it sells at a regular rate all the time. And it's because it's good.
Mm.
And so I think like, you know, when we talk about like, well, should I have an opt-in? Should I have, I was like, well, maybe, but maybe that's not actually in alignment with your business or how you want to do business, or maybe that's not going to be it's not going to be good because you don't really want to do it. Not because you can't, but because your heart's not in it.
There's so much trust in what you're saying. And I like I'm gonna not just trust myself, but like I trust that people respond to good work. Like people respond to things that are thoughtfully done with integrity and clarity. And there was something I just read, I think in Anna Halprin's book. She's an authentic movement sort of founder in some ways. Um, and I can't think of it now, but it was basically like um by following through with integrity and good work, people are attracted to that or drawn to it. And that doesn't equal big numbers, big money, big, like it doesn't look that way. Or maybe it does, but that's secondary to
Yeah.
the sort of what it means to make decisions and choices around the work that you're doing that feel within your boundaries, within your practice, within your scope, within your heart, and then letting go of the other part, which I realize can sound maybe, I guess, privileged at some level because you're not trying to pay rent with just that book, right? You have other options for income. So it's not the same, there's not the same fire lit beneath it, like this has to work or I'm doomed.
Right.
Um, but I was just listening to somebody yesterday talk about like this time, I'm getting close to 50 and it feels like, how do I want to spend the second half of my life? Like, do I want to keep scrambling to get that
Right.
feeling of hustle, or like self-employment is hard. It's hard. It's like the fire goes out the minute you turn away from it if you're not constantly adding kindling or another log or there's like that feeling of it, sort of being relentless. And that's fine if the fire I'm tending to has meaning for me, if it creates warmth for others, or but if it's just a fire to feed, I don't want to spend my time like scrambling for kindling. So it makes me think of like, these are my days, and this is my time. And um I hear that in what you're saying. Like, how do I want to write this book? How do I want this book to go out in the world? What matters to me about what is communicated through the what I'm modeling, and how I not just write, but publish and distribute and market.
Yeah. And it's definitely there's a couple of things. Like first, Lisa, my writing coach, said to me, nobody writing a book is not a good investment. Like it's
Yeah. No,
you
it's
can't
not.
think of it that way. And I mean, you can't then, of course, the publicists and the publishers will tell you differently because they're very frustrated with me. What are your goals for your book? I was like, I want it to be read. They're like, "Oh, did you want more clients?" And I was like, oh, I guess. And and that wasn't, yes, I did want more clients. I wasn't like, but I wasn't thinking about that as my motivation to write the book. And also, to be perfectly honest, I was freaked out I had a hard time accepting the idea that it would get me anything, which is more about me. Um, but I, at the end of the day, the motivation to write it and everything had nothing to do although it started from interestingly enough, an exercise to get more clients. That wasn't what it was about for me. And there's nothing wrong with if that's why you're writing a book. I want to be clear for anyone who might hear this and think otherwise. Like, if you are a strong writer and you want to write a book to get more clients, awesome. That wasn't what I was doing. And, if you're writing a book to get more clients, I'm telling you, just make it good and you'll get more clients. Like, just to be honest,
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
get the right clients. Um, it's weird though, but this is not my primary source of income.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah.
is a big thing. And I was thinking about that as you were saying that. And that's another thing financial wellness is just as important as the other stuff. So
Mm.
we have to think about that too. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I have the free time in the day to do that, because of other source of income. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So I have this question that I was like, I did have in the shower this morning, that I was like, no, don't bring it. But I was like, but I don't know anybody else I can ask about this. Um, and it's a little like it's a veer away from the writing conversation, but I'm feeling it really present. So that's why I'm sort of bringing it forward. I was like, if it comes up, it comes up. If it doesn't, doesn't. There's a thing that I explored almost experimentally with when I did yoga therapy, because there's a lot of exploration around edge, but it's a passive edge. And I came from a very muscly background, and the dance I did was incredibly strong women and impact and flight and that kind of thing. And I'm very drawn to um, difficult athleticism and what I was calling active edge. And I was really interested I did a workshop. This was part of the experimenting with it. Like, what is an active edge as opposed to a passive edge or an emotional edge or a psychic edge? If I did a wall sit and my thighs start turning on,
Mhm.
that creates an edge,
Mhm.
some kind of edge. How am I being with it? And what I found that served me very well when I was in that kind of dance was I wanted to lean in. Like, I was like, oh, yes. Not in a necessarily um, masochistic or self damaging way, but there's something that turns on for me when it gets hard. I like it. And the more work I did with people, the more I realized, wow, there's so many variations of how people relate to this effort, to
Oh,
this edge of effort, right? And when you talk about weightlifting,
Mhm.
And I'm like, this is her thing, is effort, is muscular engagement, is like that feeling of hard, really fucking hard, physically hard.
Mhm.
What is elicited inside when you come up against your edge? And I would do all these weird experiments with myself where I knew I can, let me see how many push-ups I can do. This is a younger version of me. And then I was like, I know I can do more. I haven't actually reached the edge. And I was like, this is a weird relationship to this edge. Like I definitely couldn't find the end.
Mhm.
And that was like a little weird. So that's been something I've been unpacking for years.
Mhm.
Whereas a soft edge was intolerable, right? Like all the way back up to a place where, for example, run half a mile and call that your jog. I was like, I can't. That's nothing. I don't know what that is. I don't know where I am. I can't locate myself. This is meaningless. Like I couldn't, right? So that was far more edgy. To be in a place of less sensation, less effort, less difficult was so much more activating than the other, right? So, okay, this is 20 years of like unpacking these elements. And now I've sort of come back. So that was like a big long exploration and healing for me. Was how can I start to understand myself inside these edges more in a way that feels loving, but also broadens my range. Like, um, and so I could talk about that a long time. But when I was thinking, recently I've been like lifting weights again because I I miss the effort of it. I also know that's something my body likes to do. And looking at how that relationship has changed. So now when it gets really hard, I don't have the same like, ooh, I want to go deeper, deeper. Oops, this happens all the time on my Zoom.
It's a new, it's a new feature. There is a way to turn it off.
I have to turn it off. It happens all. Wait, I
It's
know
in
there's a
your,
couple that.
yeah, the thumbs up is in
Yeah.
the Apple settings.
Okay.
We can talk about that
Okay. So
later.
anyway, so I was thinking of you, and I was wondering. I would love to hear more about. I'm calling it active age, but like, what I know this is deep and probably long and you have a lot to say about like, but this edge of meeting yourself inside effort, inside something that's hard, inside an active edge, like what how how do you understand that inside yourself or communicate about it with others?
I like that you have faith in me that I have a lot to say. Maybe after a couple therapy sessions. I no, I will what came to mind. So I'm gonna take this as like an opportunity. I just said like to somebody, I was like, I am in this funny place. Um, I actually I'm not weightlifting anymore, which
Yeah.
is shocking to I think a lot of people because you sort of get frozen in time and place by a book.
Yeah.
And that's not to say I won't again, but I actually haven't done any lifting since the very beginning of July. So it's a long time because we are now in March. And it happened because I got hurt again. And so at first it was just like trying to get rehab. My life is taking a funny shape. It's very hard for me to have regular routine right now. And so rehab wasn't quite as straightforward as it had been, and strength training wasn't quite as straightforward as it had been, because I split my time between New York and Massachusetts, and
Mm.
it's just different, you know. Um, and then I would try to lift, and like everything would hurt. I am doing much. My body is fine. I'm rehabbing, and it's great. Um, but once I started to kind of stop, here we are talking about the shoulds again. There was a couple things. There was like once I kind of was able to, those were maybe the hardest ones to clear. Like I should be strength training.
Mm.
I'm in perimenopause and I am, bone density and I am the lady who lifts the heavy things. I can still pick up really heavy things. I learned that this week when I moved some furniture. Uh, but it was so many things wrapped up in the I should be lifting weights. Once I was able to at least put them down,
Mm-hmm.
not hold on to those quite so hard, then grief, a lot of grief came up for me, and that would be a whole nother episode. Um, I also was like, and this is what made me think about it. I don't want to feel sore like that anymore. I don't want, and this is not to say I was doing anything wrong or bad or that I didn't like feeling it, for kind of what you're talking about. I enjoyed feeling what I think you're talking about, that active edge. I enjoyed like oh wow, I am coming up against what I can do. And it is more than what I could do last week, last month. I am I am able to trust my body. I am able to trust myself, because when you're also working with that active edge, you need to know that you are going to be the person to actually say, no, actually, this is it. Um, and there's a lot of physical discomfort that comes with that. And it's like, I don't need that anymore. Not right now. I don't want that. I was like, and I had started doing Pilates. I didn't know right now that there is a trend, I guess, among younger generations on social media talking about like women leaving weightlifting, and saying, going to Pilates, saying they're tired of being like thick and they want to have these little Pilates bodies. I was like, well, no, I'm just doing Pilates because my joints really like it.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
I'm heavier than I've ever been. I'm certainly not getting some sort of ballerina body from Pilates. Um, but that was the thing, was like, I was feeling really good. It was physically good for my body, good for parts that were not getting the TLC from powerlifting. And so there was like just the physical goodness, but there was also something about moving in this totally different way. It was a different kind of hard,
Mm-hmm.
definitely uncomfortable in a different way. Um, and I was like, and I liked that. I'm still getting that like edge.
Mm-hmm.
It's less cool to look at, although the reformer looks pretty cool. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but like, I don't wake up the next day being like, do I need to take Advil to sit on the toilet? Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can just lower myself down without a groan onto a chair. Um, I just, and I was like, this is nice. This,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so I think that maybe without knowing that that's what I had been doing, exploring that active edge, I think I also maybe got a little tired of exploring it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it sounds like the going from that super physical dance and feeling the way you did. I look back at what I did to train for that, and I mean, it's intense. It was like, professional athletes rigor, and how I was always in pain somewhere. Like that was the just how it was.
Mhm.
And leaving that and feeling for the first time connection between parts in a deep way that I hadn't felt really good, and moving all the way to this very softer side. And it was similar, like it felt so good and hard in different ways. And now I'm like looping back to explore, like, can I engage with effort and not end up in that pattern that I was in? So it's like it's a funny one, and it's humbling, honestly. Like it feels like I can't possibly do what I was doing, but in my brain I think I can. Like, oh, careful, Weena, don't go running 13 miles. It's like can't even, like, I'm at 3. That's really where I that's like maxing out, honestly. Um, so it's a weird, discordant combination of patterns, of old me's, of having some version of myself in my brain that's maybe not real in my physical body, exploring different ranges of motion, different places, inhabiting parts of myself that feel awkward and weird and hanging out there longer. Um, that's one of the things I think authentic movement brought me the most, was feeling like I had reached all these parts of myself in my body through no method, through just letting my body kind of decide for long periods of time, like, where does it want to go? What does it want to do? It is not a great word, but me,
Right.
where do I want to go? What do I want to do? How do I want to move? And feeling so deeply integrated in a way maybe I've never felt before, possibly because of the witness role too. But I don't know. It feels like that infinity sign of kind of circling back and picking back up the weights and playing with effort and not knowing, like touching up against that old feeling of like, ooh, get in there and like just really like hold it, and then being like, but can you, do you, maybe, sure, go for it. You're not going to live there, not at this stage. So these kind of circling back and picking up and dropping off and returning. Um, I hear that a lot in what you're saying too. It's like, now
Yeah.
you're here. Yeah.
It was very hard for me to just to allow myself to start. I'm still struggling with it, like the intuitive moving thing. There's no so I am part of what's been going on, and part of what the next book project about is I've actually been in recovery for eating disorder
Mm,
and working on intuitive eating and intuitive movement.
mm,
And coming from a place of, I think sometimes there were like a lot of really good, helpful things about training the way I was training. And there wasn't anything wrong for the most part. Like I have a program, and of course, because I approached it, generously and allowing myself to maybe not stick to it a ton, but I think I was like, I have this program I follow. I try to train, strength train 3 days a week. And the idea is this is the path, and this is where we got in trouble. This is the path to my pain-free, happy, healthy, whatever I had, all the eggs I had put in that basket life. This is the path.
mm,
Path is quantifiable.
mm,
It is, this is the priority. All the other things, that you enjoy doing in terms of movement come second, is what I told myself and continue to tell myself. It's a battle.
mm,
And it totally, really, I really hurt my back in July. And it wasn't in the gym, because it's never in the gym when it happens. So it's doing something totally uncool. I was trying on pants.
mm, mhm.
And I was like, oh shit.
Gosh.
And even now, like, and then the back led to an ankle and led to a knee. It's like been a whole thing. But even today, I was like, okay, I was telling my physical therapist, it's like, I've been doing this walking program because I want to get back to being able to hike and everything. And I've been rebuilding my ability to walk distances. And so when I have time, I should be walking, because that's the path to hiking, because da. And I keep wanting to go swimming, and I don't go swimming because if I have time to swimming, I should be walking. You can't
Mm,
believe
mhm.
it. I
Oh,
can't believe
yeah.
it. And people are like, but didn't you write this book? I'm like, yes.
Because I need to hear it. Yeah.
And I forgot. Apparently I need to read it. And so and on Monday, I was so in my head and I was just making myself just wildly unhappy. And I was like, you know what? I just need to swim. And so I like just put on my bathing suit and went to the pool and swam. And my knee felt better than it much better. More better is not proper English, but more better than it had felt. And I also swam. I hadn't in about as long, I haven't really done any like swimming. And I got in the pool and swimming was more easy and more efficient than it had ever been,
Mm.
probably because of the Pilates.
Mm.
And I was like, look at this. I was like, I am moving my body. I'm getting out of my head. I'm listening to what my body wants to do. And I feel better than I have felt in so.
Mm-hmm.
And even my PT was like, well, you don't have to. She's like, is it because of the program? Because I gave you a walking program. I was like, yes. I was like, I want an A plus. And she was like, no,
Yeah.
that's how it works. You need a rubric.
Yeah.
um, and just like learning to because there are all of these ways to explore. I think you and I are cut from the same cloth and like getting really curious about the uncomfortable edges and like what can I do? Why does this feel awkward? I guess I'll hang out here and try to figure it out. Um, and I think I'm realizing that like I will enjoy doing that and also get more of that if I take myself away from there is a rigidity in if you are strength training in order to get stronger.
Right.
Like there's
Yeah.
programming in there
Right.
and it serves a purpose, but that's not
Mm-hmm.
what I need right
It's so hard to figure out. I just talked to my brother yesterday because I was in that headspace all day. I could not get my feet under me. And there's all the conversation that goes with it. Oh, Weena, it's a transition week. You've been handling a lot of family health stuff. Like, be easy. And it's like, okay, be easy. But like, also, I would feel better if I went outside and did like, even just a like walkie run. Doesn't even have to be, just do some. And it's like, but it's rainy and I don't want to go. Okay, so don't go. You don't have, I mean, like, in like back and forth all day. Just this whole thing where the reality is both options are fine.
now.
Both options have value. Neither one is right. And I'm not going to find out. I have to unhook from this polarizing discussion in my brain about how to be good about movement in my body and just, I don't know, like let it go. Or ended up listening to a podcast because it's like I had to unhook from the traction of that narrative and find something else. But it was also, how do I stay inside not knowing what is good and right for me right now? Because sometimes that movement answer comes so quickly and I know immediately. Wednesdays, there's a teacher that teaches Zumba. It's not Zumba, it's really just dance class, like Latin dance class outside of the park. And if I get my ass there, I am fed for days. It is so joyful. And I can't fit it into my, like, there's no fitness tracking that marks it. I can't, there's no data that comes from it, but totally joy filled and so fun. And I'm exhausted. It's hard. It's really, it's so fun. But that's not, it's because I know that it doesn't mean that's always the right answer either. It's sort of like that conversation is so tricky. And I think that's when I just have to like ask for grace because I'm just going to be uncomfortable and then it will end. and then I will and then I won't be. I mean, and so I don't know. It's like I want there to be a like, well, just do, go do 10 minutes of authentic movement or go to, but the reality is there's no answer for me when I'm in that place.
Mhm.
Um, and probably most likely it's some patterned avoidance of grief or sadness and that I've like found a way to like orchestrate a pattern around to hover just above so that I don't have to enter into. And so It's what reminded me that that's there this morning with you, was just like 5 minutes of like not knowing what I'm doing, being seen, not trying to like fix or make or get better or heal, or just fucking being right there and like moving how I want, revealed to me, oh shit, yeah, I'm fucking sad, like it's there. And so, you know, blessings. There's like, I don't know how, and I can't say that, that would have been the right medicine yesterday, but
Right.
it was today. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I think there's so much to say. Um, what a question I had when I was listening. I Do you think some of this like uh I gotta figure out the solution
mm,
kind of and comes from I feel like there is a danger in healing work or being a consumer of healing things where we think we always need to be fixing ourselves.
100%.
And I just started saying things like I was like, admitting something. I wish I could bring something to mind. There are plenty of things. My brain is protecting me, I guess, because it's like I'm not going to say something to name. But like, this is something about me that's not awesome. And I have done so much work. Maybe I'll get to it. Maybe I won't. Today is not a day that I am going to improve myself.
Yeah.
Today is a day I'm going to lean into the grief or the joy or all the things. Today is a day I'm just going to read my favorite book and starting to actually like, and not putting it in my calendar, honoring the impulse of like, nope, today is like I'm just existing. I am waking up and I see today is a day where I am just gonna be me
Mhm.
and whatever that looks like. Because and I mean, I know, and there's definitely a conversation, big capitalism,
Mm.
consumerism, all of the isms, all of the social media, we can talk about all of that. But at the end of the day, we're existing in this world, and I feel like it's I'm moving into a place in my life where I'm like, enough. Like, yeah, of course, I'm going to
Yeah,
continue to grow and be curious. That
sure.
needs me. And I don't need to constantly be striving to be better. I'm pretty
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. Learning how to own that has been, I feel like, is the next stage. I feel like that's what moving into elderhood or like moving into an older role model is like accepting your dopeness. Like also just being like, yeah, it's not that I'm going to stop growing and learning, but I'm not putting all of my energy into not being exactly who I am. I'm fucking broken. I'm
Yep.
broken and I will continue to be broken until I perish. And so it's not that I'm about not being broken. It's about changing my relationship to my brokenness and also being able to, it's not rest maybe, but have the humility to just be. I mean, I say this in my groups all the time, but like take a B minus. But really, what I mean is like not even that. Like take away the grading system. And like yesterday, all I could do was I said I'm going to do tangible things that are piling up and completely overwhelming, like laundry.
Mhm.
We have to go to the fucking laundromat. So it's like go do the things where you can see physical change, but all of it is under this guise of like feeling better, being better, doing better. It's the word better. And there's some, I think there's some desire to mature past that template
Yeah.
and exist in the animal way of tending to the things that are growing and nourishing the things that need it. And like, I don't know if you've experienced this, but something that I love so much about one on one work is the feeling of going away. Not really, but like me,
Mm-hmm.
the better, the good, the value, whatever value I've deemed I have, sort of my experience in my body is it doesn't exist or something when I'm in a really connected one on one. And there's a tremendous relief to that.
Yeah.
Like it's just not about me. There's
Right.
something about that that's not cathartic, but definitely feeds me.
It's about the pair, it's about the us, the
Yeah,
duo.
connection.
You know, yeah. And that other thing, all I could keep thinking, this is you and I can keep this in mind and anyone else who wants to, instead of like doing better, feeling better, being better, just like doing, feeling, and being.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. There
Just
you go.
doing, feeling, and being. And I think yeah, and in that in the one-on-one work, it's easier to drop. I think you're right. And it's because while you like if you're doing one-on-one work, there's you, the practitioner, then the client, you, the client, there's the client, and then there's the third figure, which is the joining, the duo. I always used to think of it as like there was a duo or you were separate, but actually, I've had a reframe recently, and it's like, oh no, there are three entities.
Mm,
The two people, and then the third entity is the pairing. And if you're really in that pairing, then yeah, all the things you're not alone in this vacuum.
mm,
So you're, the ego stuff drops away because that's not where that guy goes.
hmm I love that. Thank you for that. Interrupting my conversation with Laura here just to make sure that you all knew about my next SEAM course that's coming up for SEPs, for therapists, somatic coaches, and facilitators. It's called From Patterns to Presence, and I'll be co-facilitating this 8-week virtual course with SE faculty member Mariana Bocuzzi. It starts May 1st, goes through June 19th. I've been prepping this one for a long time. I'm so happy to finally have it available. We have limited spots and early bird pricing until April 1st. You can find out more on my site, weenapauly.com, and find out more on Instagram at Weena Pauly-Tarr. How are you doing with time and all that? I realize that, part of how I do this is I don't really have an ending, but I want to check in and see how you're.
But we'll talk all day. No, I
Right.
I am. I'm very flexible today. And once I realized we were going to go for a while, I ate a little something before.
Oh, good. The food thing is also an interesting, we had a little chat. I feel like we talked about that for a brief second, maybe when we were in SE training at
Yeah.
lunch or something. But like that whole how to nourish myself, the patterns we inherit or are enculturated with, and it's messy business, that stuff.
Oh, it is. It is. It is. And I
Yeah.
think, we can also, for me, I was very aware, and I could even pinpoint where a lot of it came from, not all of it, um, that I, had an eating disorder and I even had a diagnosis, but I was like, well, I have, sometimes self-awareness will be enough to get you over the hump. But what I realized was like, I am spending so much energy trying to believe that I have this under control.
Mm,
And could couldn't my what would life be like if I didn't have to spend this energy trying to keep it under control and I actually healed this part of me? So this was an area where it felt worth the investment. Um, And it's been a couple of years, and my life has radically changed, actually.
Mm.
That's really been what I have been exploring more of now, which is when you are willing to listen, ask yourself, like, what, learn to trust yourself enough to be able to ask yourself and honor yourself when you say, what is it that I want to eat? Um, what other things do you start to trust yourself
Mm.
to want and have, right?
Mhm. Ugh, yes.
Was big for me.
Mhm.
And I, I mentioned being in this long distance relationship. The last time we talked, I believe I was in a marriage, and
Mhm.
it's we are divorcing, and it's all very amicable, and um, it's we have an incredible friendship. But part of the one of the things, I remember saying, I was like, I didn't realize I was going to go into recovery and get divorced. Like but I realized that I wasn't, and in my realization, and then in our conversations, it was both of us weren't really getting everything. We weren't being fully nourished by the marriage. We had an incredible friendship, and that kept us going for a very long time. But that romantic love, and we decided we were not open to, neither one of us felt that, like, because a lot of time that might open a conversation to more like polyamorous things. You can't get everything from one person and whatever. And we're like, yeah, yes, and that's not for us. Let's honor. It was actually um, my husband who said, I think it's time we honor our relationship for what it is, which is like
Mm.
best friends. It's a
Mm.
friendship. And you know, I think I knew that for a while, but it took me practicing in the kitchen. What do I want? Yes, you can have that. What do I want? Yes, you can have that. Like, and things are going to happen. Like I'm taking a lot of rules off of what I can eat. I gained a tremendous amount of weight because I didn't have other thing, it's a step-by-step process, and I was so excited. And that happens
Mhm.
the same way where I was like, I want more, you know, romance and intimacy. Um, I kind of knew that, but once I finally allowed myself to sort of start saying it out loud, and it grew in volume in my head, and then I was like, no, I get to say I want this. Yeah, then there was a larger conversation, and it shifted huge parts of my life. And I have more love in my life than ever now. And not just because I'm in a crazy love story of a relationship, but also with myself,
Mm.
with my, community. I uprooted a large part of my life, and I'm now half the time in Massachusetts, and I have a tremendous community there, and I see them and I'm with them. And so it's that kind of love, and it all came from like me literally being like teaching myself again that it was okay to be like, what do I want to eat? Okay. Like, oh, you want Oreos, and you've for years have been like, I can't have Oreos. And you bring the Oreos into the house, and what happens? I eat the whole container and I feel sick. Well, okay, we got to work on that.
Mhm.
That wasn't terrible. I need new clothes. I'm not thrilled about it, but it's not terrible. And actually, in the end, I'm having this really fulfilling renaissance with creativity and food writing, and like coming alive in areas of my life where I had really dulled over the years. And I think that the same thing, can be said. And then that's what happened. It happened in terms of other areas of my life. It happened with the writing too. I was finally like, yeah, I know people really like my teacher writing and my prescriptive writing, but I want to write more literary, creative nonfiction. And so that is what I'm going to do, even though everyone wants me to teach a weightlifting workshop and write another hip opener article.
Yeah.
I was like, mm-mm.
Yeah.
I am going to go write about food. I'll see you in
Um,
a couple months. And yeah,
I
that's
mean, so much of what you're saying has deep familiarity and resonance for me. I mean, I don't talk a lot about my food journey because it feels like it's hard to wrap my hands around. Um, but I come from disordered eating home. My mom and my dad, I would say, at some level, learned, you know, less is always better. Restrict, restrict, not necessarily outwardly, because there was a very healthy conversation around food, but the behaviors weren't. So what was modeled was different.
sure.
Um, and
And
yeah, spent a big part of my adult life trying to understand that. And one of the most liberating moments of my life was I wanted a chocolate bar and I bought it, which was already like insane to me, like, which is really so ridiculous. And I forgot that I had it in my bag. And anyone who has eating stuff knows you don't fucking forget where shit is or how much it is or where you stashed it or if there's one piece left or two, like, you know. And the fact that I had forgotten it was even there was such a moment of freedom. And it came from what you're talking about. And it's the same, everything you're saying, and it's all, of course, related, but it's so much about my relationship to movement too, is really trusting that intuitively my body kind of knows. So yesterday, the day I was explaining or I couldn't get my feet, all my old eating patterns were so loud. And there was an indulgence in it, like, fuck it, like, let's whatever. And what was different this morning was the pattern was there and I could feel it. But there was the question that you just asked, which is like, what would taste so good? Like, Weena, what do you really want to eat this morning? Like, what would feel good and taste good? And just a little bit of a moment to consider desire and want in a longer way, not in an immediate reach and grab way, like in an actual fulfilling way, led me to make myself a beautiful breakfast, which is not what I did yesterday, and enjoy it, which is so different. And it is, the next sort of like wrist concentric circle around that is money for
Mm,
me, is like money and food, such an interesting parallel there, that I'm just now starting to understand more of how that rolls and works inside and tangles up in me. It's just there's, you know, and so it sounds like I'm saying like intuition and like intuitive eating and intuitive everything and just following desire is it. And we know that's not
right.
totally all of it, right? Because sometimes I can't trust those wants because I don't know if it's really a deep desire or if it's in sort of impulsive want,
Mhm.
which is fine too. Impulse is also like following a quick impulse. Absolutely. And there's more. So the I think relationship with food, coming from the dance world, obviously, but also weight training world, and coming from a place where the way I fed myself when I was in that company, for example, was like, how do you not die in this show? You
Yeah.
have to be fed, you have to have enough calories, but it was very much about um, ins and outs, energetic ins, energetic outs. It was a weird sort of math. It was not about desire.
Right.
And that's what, when you start asking the question, a lot of times this happens when we embark on an authentic movement practice or in groups, where when you sit with the question of like, how do I want to move without like without music playing, like, how do you want to move?
Yeah.
It's like someone's like, I don't know. Well, I should open up my QLs quite tight. And like, but does your QL want to open? Like, how does your body want to move? And it can take years to find want. And and I know it's the same in the realm of sexuality And
It
right?
is.
Like, yeah.
My therapist was always saying to me, like, talking about like desire and appetite for food and sex is like the same thing. And I think you can be said for, movement and appetites, just this idea. I mean, I've heard, appetite used a lot, and I in all of these different ways, right? I keep having appetite for destruction. That album title.
Mm,
It's an album title. I forgot. It's middle
I
it.
definitely have that.
Um, and it's so funny. And I've been thinking about these things. And then I was listening to a podcast and, oh, what is it called? I don't remember the name of the podcast, but it's Julia Turshen's podcast. And she's a food writer, among other things. And she has been exploring appetite. It's 4 parts, 4 people from totally different disciplines. And to really listen to these 4 people speak about appetite, it finally was like, I get it. I got it up here, in my, big fat prefrontal cortex for a while. But I did not get it in my heart, my belly, my genitals, nothing. I didn't get it. How, yeah, no, there's a reason we're talking about appetites for all of these different things, because it's all appetite. It's all a wanting. And then there's a difference between hunger and appetite. And I think we're really familiar with that. Many people with food, if you kind of check in with yourself a lot. I know for me, just the other day, when I get too hungry, if I haven't planned things well and it's time to eat, but now I'm starving, I kind of am like, I am hungry, but I can't tell you what I want.
Right. Yeah.
And I think we kind of know that, or like if we're not feeling well, but we haven't eaten. And so our stomach is like rumble, rumble, but we're like, but I don't want to eat. So we know what it feels like to be hungry, but not have an appetite. Well, we can be hungry, I think, for all sorts of things and not have an appetite or not honor the appetite.
Yeah.
And that has more to do with all sorts of other things that I guess I'll give some
Mm,
thought and maybe write something about.
mm. No, that's, yeah.
You just walked on a little, that's how I was just processing some of that as I was talking now. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because my relationship to wanting, even as a kid, and it's still sort of like a joke, like Weena's wanting. Now,
hmm,
Weena's wanting. It's always like wanting. There's this wanting of like what I want. Um, and I guess in some ways, sort of, now we're sort of like getting, maybe a little psychoanalytical about it, but there's a celebration of that for me. And certainly some level of like, keep that in check, like you don't get to have
that's what I
everything you
heard when you
want.
said it, was
Yeah.
more like what you were getting was like, Wena's wanting again.
Yeah. That. And also like a more sort of puritanical kind of like, you don't like get everything you want, and what you want doesn't always serve you, which is also very true. Like there's so many flavors of wants.
Yeah.
There's so many kinds of wants. And I don't I don't want to value, the deep longing that lasts a lifetime over the one that lasts 30 seconds, but they're different and they have different flavors and drive different moves and patterns. And but beginning to inhabit like and risk wanting, I think one of the things in authentic movement that brought me to that was wanting to do a movement that I felt embarrassed about being seen. Because if you watch authentic movement, I'm making the choice now. Nobody told me to do this. So I'm revealing the fact that I value this and that I want to do it. And now
Yeah.
you're seeing that I want to do that is very vulnerable. And so letting myself do the thing I really want um, was a risk. And it came inside a trusted group of like 8 of us that went on for many years, where I got to explore safely, I would say, really going into what I want and being okay. It was like an uncoupling of want and risk, of want and threat, of want and shame. And it was like a building upon itself of if I really want to do this move, and these people are going to see me, and then realizing I was okay after and that I was still held and loved in whatever way. My body got to know that I could want safely, that I could inhabit my body in those ways and still maintain a relationship. Now, that's in the movement realm. But like all the other spaces you're talking about are certainly growing edges for me.
Yeah. I think they're growing edges for many of us. And I think the thing I also, with the food, I think it's really, you shared a little bit about your history, very little, but talked about, your parents and my parents and kind of everybody's parents. I think like, and this can extend beyond that from food now that I'm thinking about it, but we'll just talk about food. I think that it's not, yes, I have a diagnosis of binge eating disorder. However, I think so many people say like who are sort of self-aware enough or whatever, like, oh yeah, no, I've definitely had problems with eating or disordered eating, or yes, I have an eating disorder, or I had an eating disorder, or I can't stop dieting. People say variations of this theme is because culturally we have an eating disorder. It's
Thank
our
you.
food culture is disordered.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so, and now I'm
Yes.
thinking, yeah, you mentioned the word Puritan, I think, which is the underpinning of a lot of things in the United States. And it has really brought a lot of these challenging relationships to want and um, sex and sexuality and eating and dancing and expressing your emotions and all of the things. And I
Don't you
guess
think it's just like why America is so addicted to excess is the foundation is the opposite. It's like a
so. It's I was like, wow, my the so I have binge eating disorder, and so what a lot of people don't, it's actually the most common, I think aspects most people can understand, and this is an idea of like you bounce between two things. You bounce between periods of restriction. I don't eat these certain foods, or very stringent dieting or whatever, and then you're like, it looks like different things, but all of a sudden the restrictions come off, whether they come off because you've had it or because you've reached the goal or whatever. And then it's followed by a period of binging and, eating to excess and checking out and eating all of the Oreos, as opposed to, okay, I can have Oreos I want too. It's like,
mm-hmm.
oh, yeah, but the package is here, and more is more, and more is better. And so I'm going to eat all of them, and then you don't feel good. And I think that is actually a big problem with excess in the United States. As soon as you said that, I was like, oh wow, yes, right. We can't have, we want, we can't have, we want, we get, well, oh, and then it's like more and more. When is I actually always associate you with the word enough because you did a while ago, you did a workshop on that. How do we know
Mm-hmm.
what enough feels like? And I we have a culturally have a hard time acknowledging when is enough. More is often lauded as better, except in the size of your body in which you should be less.
Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like enough should be, it's such a warped relationship because there's so much shame in having a lot also. So it's like this weird thing of driven to excess and then shame around it. So then like these weird ways that we are with each other socially around having and not having.
Mhm.
And it's, to me, it's like what we're talking about. Come back to your body. Like, what does enough actually feel like? We did an experiment in authentic movement where we said there's no timer. Finish when you've had enough, when you're
Wow.
done being witnessed. And that's wildly different. So how do you make space in a culture for people who actually do need to be seen for 30 minutes and people who need to be seen for 5? I mean, it's the argument of education in classrooms. Like, that kid is so out of control and constantly needs attention. Yeah, he needs more attention. He just needs way more. That's just a reality. That's got to happen. But how do you make space for that when you have 28 other kids who need different things? And so it's like, how do you create systems and ways that we can tolerate and inhabit gathering spaces and places where we're in proximity and working together and playing together when those senses are different? And the only, I mean, there's going to be a medium. There's going to be an average. There's going to be like, well, most people are kind of done around 15 minutes with AM. And you kind of move from there. But I guess my desire is that, yes, in order to live together, we have to sort of acknowledge that there is a need for operating systems that incorporate most people. But it doesn't mean we can't continue to ask if that's true for us. It doesn't mean we can't continue to explore, is that enough? Like, do I want more? Like, what does it feel like? Some people, and myself in this, don't even know what that is because I've never dared to explore. Like, would enough be a day long authentic movement? Like, I don't know. Where's the end? Like, kind of what we were talking about in the beginning with active edge.
Yeah.
There's a relief to me in active edge in that, like, your physicality breaks down, like, your muscle can't contract again.
Mhm.
And then in my head, I'm always like, yeah, but if you held a gun to my head, I probably could do more. Like, there's definitely like, but there is a point.
There is a point.
There's a point where that won't happen. Where that,
Right.
so that's an edge I think people explore who are in, maybe a more adrenaline kind of sports or whatever. There's an edge, there's something they're seeking there. But like with just simple things of like, have I had enough sleep? Have I had enough to eat? What does enough feel like? Am I talking? Have I listened enough? Have I spoken enough? I don't know if I really have enough experience with that sensation to be able to clarify it. It takes a lot of energy to even ask myself and respond.
Yeah.
Is it? And it took, that, and the reality is that the answer is so different. So like one day, enough AM is going to be 35 minutes. And then maybe 2 hours later, it's 10. So, but it's, I guess, I don't want to stop asking.
Yeah. No, we can't because it is always different. And that doesn't always mean it can be honored, but
Right.
it's worth knowing because maybe it can't be honored that way, but it can be honored a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, when you said that thing about you did a thing where everybody just got to do it until they had enough, the first voice at the boardroom in my brain went, "You can't do that." I was like, "Wow, okay."
Well, she's got the mic today.
No, I'm pretty sure that's what they did, and it seems like it's fine because Weena's here right now, and we're having a podcast. She's not still doing AM with their group of 8 people or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, but there's fear though in there of like what would happen. I think that's the whole fear with food. If you let yourself if you say, Weena, you can have Krispy Kreme donuts, go ahead. Then for most people, and this is the voices I've been working with forever, is like, then you're going to eat 27 of them. And it's like, really? I don't know if that's true. Maybe it might be, but like, but daring to move into that. And listen, this is a conversation, and I had this conversation with Fabio and a couple other people who are in rooms of addiction. This is a really tricky conversation with addiction.
Mhm.
To get to talk about addiction and want is really tricky. And
Mm,
so I think just to clarify, the want I'm talking about is not sacrificing what I want long term for what I want now.
right.
But I think it can get really, they can all get sort of put in the same pocket when we're
Yes,
talking about patterns of addiction, and that sort of distinction in different kinds of wants and all that can be really dangerous territory to explore, or scary, like literally life or death scary. So I want
definitely.
to just acknowledge that. Yeah.
That's important. Yeah, I know. And the sort of like what I was saying before, or with the Krispy Kreme donut, like, I mean, you have 27 donuts, you probably feel sick. And like, I think that's for me, the consequences. I mean, the big bad for me, this isn't for everybody, for me, the big bad is that I'm going to keep eating and I'm going to gain weight. And that happened. And now I'm very frustrated getting dressed. And I'm working with that. That was it. That
Yeah.
was that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it brings a lot. It brings some hefty therapy bills as well. But like it is a very different situation than
Yeah.
about substances and different addictions, because the brain is having a different relationship to short-term want, long-term want. I don't know
And
much.
it's all variations of the same theme though. I mean, there's some people that, you know, work with caffeine. Like
Mhm.
that's the addiction that they're working with, the pattern, the drug of choice that they're figuring out. There are other people who are on, figuring out patterns of opioid addiction. Like there's lots of variation in methods. And
Yeah.
the pattern is sort of ultimately not that different. The results are for sure. I mean, perhaps if we talk about like, not not bettering ourselves, there's room for some of those addictions to be lifelong. I don't know. Like that's the sort of thing where, if I admit my brokenness, maybe that just means I just am gonna have coffee every morning until I am dust. Like that's just something I'm not going to get better at or improve on. And I think they're inherent in that for me, or the value in saying that out loud is just that I want to offer choice, that we
Mm.
get to decide. Everybody gets to decide. And there's not a moral imperative to eliminate all patterns and vices, and it doesn't make you better person. My brother said something that I loved. I was like, oh my God, that's meme worthy. Because he was trying to talk me out of my day a little bit yesterday. And I said, oh, yeah, one of the most soothing things I could do, like click soothing to my body, is like scrolling and eating chips, like simultaneously. Like both things I'm being fed and I'm being fed. But it's like,
I don't even
it's
know if
like
I could do
literally,
that with my
oh,
hand,
yeah,
like,
I can show
well.
you how. You want, I'll give a workshop on it. It's literally like, and I thought about it the other day, I was like, what is the sensation of this? I was like, it is absolute, like numbing out in the best way. Like it was like numbing out in like the most sating way. And he said it, and I said, I know it's like a sort of sabotage, and I can allow, like give myself time to explore it. And he said, it's not self-sabotage, it's self-soothatage.
Oh yes, I like
Isn't
it.
that good?
It is because like okay,
Soothatage.
like yeah,
Yeah.
is would your doctor be thrilled that you or whatever? I don't know.
Yeah.
Whoever is it a noble and healthy practice to scroll on your phone and eat your favorite chip, without paying any attention to anything and
Right.
numbing out? I mean, it serves a purpose. It's like, what are the consequences? Like
Yeah.
it's not really harmful. I mean, over time it adds up, but like,
Sure.
I had I was watching Love is Blind and
I haven't seen it, but people have brought it up to me several times.
I was like binging it. I had been watching it and then I was like, oh, and I wanted to catch up to my friends who had been watching all of it. So I was like watching, but of course I wasn't actually. I was doing that thing where you have the big screen I had on the
Uh-huh.
TV and then I had my little screen in front of me and I'm scrolling and I'm not drinking enough water and I'm just sitting on the couch like a shrimp and I stayed up really late doing this activity, we'll call it. And
Mm-hmm.
when I went to bed, I was like, I feel very bad. I have headache from this posture and the screens, and I feel kind of gross, and I am not properly hydrated. Yeah. I went to bed. I
Yeah.
drank some water. I went to
Yeah.
bed. Next, I was like, maybe less of that. And one of
Yeah.
the things, like the scrolling thing for me, actually, was Candy Crush. I used to play Candy Crush all the time
Mm.
to the point where it was like not good. Like it was actually upsetting my sleep because I was
Mm.
like getting
Eating.
candies, like
This is my
seeing
son. Yeah.
candies in my sleep. I was like, okay, this is not good. Like it is actually giving me bad dreams or like less restful sleep. So I replaced it with Duolingo, which you can't do while watching Love is Blind. But besides that, and honestly, like I'm learning some French.
Nice.
I'm putting
Yeah.
down the phone a bit, but like I still
Yeah.
scroll and I still watch Love is Blind and scroll and not drink enough water sometimes. I don't think it's made me a terrible person, and I don't think the headaches were really awesome, but it was fine.
Yeah. I mean, and also, I think it's important, especially people who are in like the somatic profession, to admit the function of numbing out and
Mhm.
their own relationship to it, because I don't know, I don't necessarily feel trusting of someone who is above and beyond all of that.
I think
So,
in one of
yeah,
our trainings, we learned about not pathology. One of our teachers in our class was talking about not pathologizing
dissociation.
association.
Yeah,
And I
I
was like,
loved that. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's a way we cope with it too much.
Yeah. Yeah. It's information. Right. You're like, okay. And I think as a parent, this has been tough because watching my kid, you know, be insanely addicted to Geometry Dash, which is like the thing that's really and not get enough of.
Yeah.
I
That's what
tried it the other day because I was like, what is this? So I'm like trying to do it. And we just laugh because I'm so bad at video games. Like, you can't believe how terrible I am. But you're watching it and you're like, you're dissociating, you're numbing out, you're not having feelings, you're not being with your friends. Like, and it is so hard to be understanding of whatever has drawn him to it and keeps him there, and that it isn't inherently evil. It's information. And so, part of that can happen. And also, he has great friendships and he's going to do a whole, hang out with his friends at the parkour play. Like, he's okay. But my knee jerk reaction, because obviously it's what I have with myself, is that's bad. You're failing, get better, do better, be better, be a better kid. Poor kids. Laura,
Weena.
are you feeling well? I feel like I'm getting to my talking edge, maybe.
All right.
Talking, yeah. but I also feel like we're kind of just starting.
I know. Well, I feel like we could keep talking. I don't know if other people would keep listening.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm assuming people have stopped by now, and I'm all for it. It's like, yeah, I feel selfish in the fact that I don't know anything about this podcast or how well it does or not, because it feels so deeply satisfying and enjoyable to do. And it's like, I love being here with you. And I'm a little bit like what you were saying, like I'm making the podcast that I enjoy, and you're writing the book that you want to write.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll see what comes of it. But most important to me is connecting with you.
Yeah. This was really nice.
So nice. So nice. Thank you for listening to Laura and I's intimate and tender conversation. You can get her book, Lifting Heavy Things, most places, and you should make sure to keep an eye out for her next one that she's working on. For more information about what Laura's up to, you can check out her website, lauraKhoudari.com, and you can find her on Instagram at Laura Khoudari. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend. Until next time.